Alrighty, today we're going to have a very, very fun topic. It's about balancing your PC. You don't want it to be too far leaning towards one end and then losing all this performance on another. So how do you do that? I'm going to do my very best to show you. Before we get on, don't forget to like the video if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, link is down below to the merch store, so go get some great merch. What a lot of times what people will do is they'll do their very best to get like the highest end parts, and then they'll cheap out somewhere, be it either getting not enough RAM, and that's not wrong per se, but it does limit certain things. If you were to go, say, with a very much cheaper B450 motherboard, you're leaving a lot of performance on the floor, on the table. That's the right term. You're leaving a lot of performance on the table because the X570 theoretically is supposed to have a much better response time and communication time between the CPU and the GPU than the B450s. B450 and B550, that B stands for business. That is the cheaper area when it comes down to motherboards. If you go with the X series, this stands for enthusiasts, the extreme side of computers. So there should be a lot more features, a lot more things that you can use to make your computer work better. There are also other ways that you can lose performance. For instance, you could not use a solid-state drive, and instead of using a solid-state drive, you could use a hard drive, which is considerably not as responsive or as efficient as a solid-state drive is. You could also get a solid-state drive that does not have any DRAM cache on it. Without that DRAM cache, it isn't really going to buffer out that well, and it actually would have the same performance similar to a hard drive. So you do need to get actually decent components to what you're doing. Now, on this build here, which is my overkill build, which is why it's $3,000, this is like the very best you can do, relatively. So the Ryzen 9, the X570, really, you could really use most X570 motherboards and you're pretty much fine. This is just the one I grabbed because it was overkill. 32 gigabytes for a Ryzen 9 5550 and a 3080 probably is as much as you need. I know for my computer it takes up a lot with my Ryzen 7 5800 and my 3070 Ti. My memory runs at about 7 gigabytes on average. Now, that's out of a total of 32. So I would imagine, and this is partially going to depend case to case because everybody has different programs running in the back, different things that they're doing. For instance, right now I am recording a video, so that's using up a bit more, using up a lot more memory on my RAM than if I wasn't. And there are also other things that you could do to make your usage higher. For instance, video rendering uses a lot of CPU cores, and it needs to be getting that information to process it. That means it has to go to the RAM. If the RAM can only do so many gigabytes of things per second, and the CPU can do twice or 3 times as that, your bottleneck is going to be at the RAM. It means you need more RAM. With 32 gigabytes, I think I'm okay for right now. I am going to do a video later, though, testing on if you could run a computer on 8 gigabytes. I'll get more into the testing of this when I do the video because it's going to take a little bit and I'm going to have to do a lot of numbers and stuff, so bear with me on that when that happens. Another bottleneck that most people don't think about is their case. Their case is going to be like a huge bottleneck when it comes to terms of thermals. If there isn't ample intake for airflow and getting rid of that hot exhausted air, your computer is going to fry itself. You want a computer case that has ample airflow. The iCUE, the Corsair 5000s, 4000s are all beautiful for that. And also the 5000 has this beautiful Cables No More back to it that is just quite honestly amazing. And I kind of almost want it. If it wasn't $100, then I already have a $100 case. But let's find a case that is actually bad with airflow. Is that the new one or that the old one? That is the new one. So this is actually a good chance to show you guys something. If I can just find the other NZXT one. Here we are. So this is the NZXT H70i, which, if I'm remembering correctly, was their higher end case. Now, the front is solid metal. The only airflow you were getting was from this sliver on the back side. That's not a lot of airflow for a case to get fresh, cool air from. So a lot of times when people were putting higher end stuff in this, it was getting toasty. That thing was running hotter than it should have, somewhere around. And a GPU, I think it depends, because I think they generally max out around 80, 85. But you don't want it getting that high. You don't want it running that high. It does have a lot of quality of life problems if it's consistently running that high. Now, NZXT recently has fixed that mistake and created the new H7 Flow, which has all this ample airflow. They did get rid of the side airflow though because of this, which I'm okay with. Now, you could also kind of have some problems with cooling. This Corsair iCUE H150i, God, these names are getting hard, is actually really darn good. It is, I believe, Corsair's like flagship radiator. I could be wrong about that. And the fact that this little front is also changeable. You can change it out with a few things. And I think there are actually some third-party ones you can get. So if this one was even compatible with our board, which I'm very much doubting, actually it might be because it has the old AMD clips, I can almost assure you that this is going to be worse than the stock cooler that comes with most of your CPUs. And this one actually might get closer to that in terms of performance. So you're just adding some more money to what you don't need. If we were to go cheap as possible and still doing better than a stock cooler, I'm saying you're gonna still need to at least fork over some decent amount of cash. Like, you need to find a cooler that I at least know for a fact is good. Any of these Noctuas would be perfectly fine. For $60, I would steal them in a heartbeat. The reason for the, instead of just standing straight up, is why they're laying on their side, is for smaller form factor cases. So that could make your case look a little odder. But Noctua is a great brand when it comes down to their coolers in general. I didn't realize they had so many different fan configurations for the smaller form factor cases. Noctua is killing it. And also it does depend a little bit about what you're doing with the computer again. This is covered a little bit more in my previous video about pricing, because price performance is a very big deal. If you were wanting to overclock, somewhere in the area of the NHD15s would probably be like a good area to start when it comes in terms of pricing, around that $100 mark, because I then know for a fact it's going to work well. Noctua is a very highly recommended computer company when it comes to their cooling. Honestly, the Noctuas generally do as good as an AIO. I am completely destroying this. Now, another way you can completely bottleneck your computer is, instead of getting the very best to match with the very best graphics card, is you could actually downgrade one of those to a point to where it doesn't really compute well. So let's say, for instance, you get, instead of a 3080 to go with your 5950X, you get a 1060, a 1080, which couldn't possibly keep up with your CPU's performance. The bottleneck will be how many frames your graphics card in a graphics dependent game can do. Your CPU is going to be throwing more information at the graphics card than it can handle. Now, this is going to mean your graphics card is going to be running at a higher, performance than it should, and will overheat and you'll crash. Vice versa, if you were to pair this 3080 Ti with a Ryzen 5, I don't want to say 35, I want to say even lower, Ryzen 5 2600, your computer's going to have some problems. If it goes into a CPU intensive game, the CPU is going to be running at full bore, and your graphics card's going to be sitting there like, you even lift, bro? Point of the story is, just when you're going through, try to make good business decisions. It's a horrible term. I would say for most of you, this $1,000 build here with the 5600X, the Noctua, the ROG Strix, honestly, any 16 gigabytes of RAM, this is just the one that I grabbed because I use it. I guess Crucial's not making this one anymore. And either one of these storage, a 1650, which a case with ample airflow, and as I showed you guys earlier, there's tons on there, and a fantastic graphic power supply. A fantastic power supply will travel with you from build to build to build for a few. This Enermax one I have used, it's beautiful, and honestly, for the price, it's really, really good. 850 watts with a gold rating and an 80 plus gold rating, and it's fully modular for a little over $100. It's gorgeous, and that would round you out to almost $1,000. Now, I won't say for sure, but I am pretty sure you'll have to do it. Yep, there it is. So there are some problems with this, and it's listed right here. It's one of the nice things about PC Part Picker list, but you can change this really quickly. So I'm just gonna take this RAM out because I want a RAM that actually has a price on it. Let's do the G-Skill and the G-Skill Tridents. G-Skill Tridents are really good. Let's go with these ones. They're black. They actually might look nice. Now, you could have also, with all of those motherboards I showed, they had another thing on it saying, hey, there's a compatibility issue. The compatibility issue is a motherboard update for your BIOS setting, but that gets you to 1126. Now, I also said you could choose one of these or both of these if you really want. If you choose both of these, I would say put the NVMe one as your boot drive, and you can still have ample room for a ton of games, and then use this for mass storage. Now, this computer here has 2 terabytes. I use maybe 1, so we're just gonna say just use the 970, and that gets you back to that $1,000. Well, 1,053. This here, while still is a little unbalanced, the 1650 I would say isn't up to par with the 5600, but that was because when I built this, GPUs were a little expensive. Now, I do have a price area that I want to keep this in, but I'm perfectly fine going a little farther. I would want one, even so, the GPUs with 1 fans are cheaper, but it's because they only have 1 fan. So as long as you kind of subvert that and just add some fans in, you'll be fine. I would like that 2060 Super, please. And that 2060 Super is more than enough. It does raise the price of the build back to $1,200, but that's still in most people's budgets for if they save a little bit. I will leave this build in the link below as well. As I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and leave a like down below as well as subscribe to the channel. Also, link is also down below to the merch store. Go get some great merch. If you guys enjoyed this video, go check out the computer parts basic video I did. It was actually a really in-depth video about how each computer part works and also how they can talk to each other. Thanks guys again for tuning in, and have a good day.